Final Cut Pro is an extremely useful video editing software, perfect for beginning movie makers. It's relatively easy to pick up and honestly intuitive enough to the point where it's even quick to master. That being said, if you don't know what you're doing and you have never used the software before, of course it can be a bit intimidating. That's why in this video, I'm gonna teach you how to make your first video using Final Cut Pro. In fact, as a concrete example, the video I'm going to teach you how to make is this exact clip you're watching right now. So without further delay, let's get into it. Hello there, my inspirations. My name is Inspirasper, and as you saw from the beginning, today I'm going to be teaching you how to make your first video in Final Cut Pro. In addition, I'll just be going through the software and explaining its interface, what things do, just generally everything you'll need to know to get off the ground to learn a bit more about this software to make your first videos. That being said, let's not waste any more time and let's get into it. As you can see here in front of me, I have Final Cut Pro opened up, and this is what it should look like for you when you open it. However, maybe certain things like this screen right here won't look like this for you because you don't have anything saved, of course, in your libraries, but other than that, the general layout should look the same. If it does not look like this, go to this top right corner and make sure that all these buttons are activated. These buttons determine if certain windows are open and visible, so for the sake of this tutorial, I'm gonna make sure that they're all open, just so I can explain to you what everything does a little bit better. Next thing you're gonna wanna do, if you haven't already, is create a library. You can do this by going under File, New, and Library. Now, I believe the default directory for this is within the Movies folder. You can find this under Macintosh HD, Users, your username, and then Movies. You can name this library whatever you want. So for example, I'm just gonna name this Tutorials, for example, and then I'm gonna hit save. And all this is, a library, is just it's a folder. It's a way to store all of your projects, all of your movies. Now, under my tutorials library, I'm going to create a new event. Now, you could just do a new project, and we'll get to that in a second, but for the sake of being thorough and explaining what everything does, I'm going to create a new event. Essentially, what an event is, it's just a subfolder in your libraries that can hold multiple projects, and a project is your movie. So, I'm just gonna name this something like Final Cut Pro Tutorials, right? Now, under this event, what I can then do is I can add in multiple projects, multiple different movies under this event. So for example, maybe I wanted to make a series, right, of Final Cut Pro Tutorials. I could then create multiple projects, multiple movies for parts 1 through however many I do. So now to create my video, I'm going to add a new project. I can do this by going File, New, Project, or to short the whole File, New, you can just right click and select New Project. I'm gonna name this one something like Basics, because that's what I'm teaching you today is basics, or something like that. Name it whatever you want to name your video. This is just for the sake of your organization. Great, so now I made my first project. This is awesome. I can left click on this, and on this right window over here, I can actually see the specs of my video. For example, what resolution my movie will be at, or video, whatever you want to call it. The frames per second, the audio settings. And if you'd like, you can change these by left clicking on this modify button over here, where you can rename your project. You can determine its starting point. Say for example, I laid out some things in this project, but then I wanted to change where the video officially started when I rendered it. You can change the format, you can change the resolution, you can change the frames per second, how it's rendered, and then the audio settings. Whenever you have what you like, you can click OK, or if you want to abandon your changes, you can just hit cancel, of course. Great, so now we have a skeleton, just an empty framework for where we can add in our video. I recorded that beginning segment, the beginning 30 seconds or so of this video, and I actually have that video stored on my computer. So now what I'm going to do is import that so I can actually work with it, so I can edit it. I can do this one of two ways. One way is to make sure I'm within this proper folder under my project, and I can go to File, Import, Media. And what importing media allows you to do is add in things such as video files, audio files, images, just general media of that nature, stuff that you can add into your project. I'm going to navigate to my folder where my videos are, and then I can import what I recorded. So great, I'm at the proper directory. These are the two things that I recorded. This is my physical video recording, and this is my audio recording, my microphone. I'm going to select both of these by clicking this top one and holding shift and clicking the bottom one, and then I'm going to import all. So now you can see in this window, this is where my video is, and also right above it, this is where my audio file is, the two things that I imported. Now, as I mentioned, there were two ways to import media. The other way is to simply open up a Finder window and actually navigate to the proper directory, find all the files that you want, select all of them, and click and drag them right here, like this. Now, of course, I already have them added in, so they didn't do anything, but that's the way to do it. I personally like this way better. I think it's a bit quicker, and I have a bit more control over navigating my directories and finding what I want a little bit better, but to each their own. So great, I imported media. What does that mean? Essentially, it just means that you have your files at your disposal, ready to work with. It doesn't mean that you have any videos yet. In fact, if you were to render your project right now, it would just be 0 seconds, blank, nothing. So what I can now do is actually click and drag my media, whatever I want, into this blank area down here. This is where I'll be doing all of my video editing. This is where the magic happens. So naturally, the first thing I want to do is click and drag my movie, my video recording, onto this timeline. If you have nothing in your timeline, so before this I had nothing in there, the first thing I drag into, it'll give me this prompt asking me, hey, what settings do you want to render this video at? And I'll say, for example, I want 1080p HD at 60 FPS, just as an example, and the audio is fine. And then I'm gonna click OK. So then, if we were to go back up, left click on our project, those settings were saved. If I were to have changed them, then they would be updated. So great, now I have my video editing in my timeline. This is the very, very basics of video editing. If I were to render my video right now, I have 7 minutes of me recording, which, I mean, kind of defeats the purpose since I already had that video file. So now comes the time where we actually edit. That's the whole magic, that's the point of doing this. First thing I actually want to do is I recorded my audio separately from my video. Let's take a listen to this audio. Pro is an extremely useful video editing software perfect for beginning movie makers. Cool. Sounding good. Now, that audio is fine, but I did also record it separately with my mic, which I think improves the audio quality at least a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is left click and drag my audio file onto the timeline as well. I dragged it below this video clip. You can drag it above, however, Final Cut Pro will default all audio to go below the videos, just as an interesting little side bit. Next thing I want to do is line up this audio, because it's not quite lined up right. So now I need to figure out how to line this up. It looks like I started my recording right here, so I'm going to actually click and drag my audio file over here. And you'll notice that it snaps right to where my orange bar is. This orange bar moves to wherever I left click on my timeline. So if I want something to go right here, I can click and drag and it'll snap right to there. Now, if it isn't snapping for you, that means your snapping isn't toggled. This option isn't set for you. You can do this by going over here and clicking this button, or by pressing the N key on your keyboard. Toggling snapping, like I said, allows clips to snap to that orange bar, or also to previous cuts, as I'll demonstrate later. If I have this option toggled off, I can have more precise options. However, I can't snap to this grid, which can be super useful at times when you know exactly where you want something to be. So now I want to line up my audio recording with my video recording. I want to make it so that my lips are synced up with my voice. Now this might be a bit tough to do right now, how we're looking at it, so I kind of want to zoom in. You can zoom in by pressing Command plus, and you can also use Command minus to zoom out. Or in my case, I'm using a laptop and I can use my trackpad to zoom in, as you would normally zoom in on any other thing. So now we're zoomed in on our timeline, and I can scroll through this with my mouse, or by clicking down here, you can scroll through your timeline, and you'll see that the audio waveform on this video, these peaks and valleys, is not quite synced up with the audio file over here. So now what I'm going to want to do is line those up, so that way my voice is lined up with my video. So now if I were to hit play, and you can play your video by pressing the space bar as a shortcut. Final Cut Pro is an extremely useful video editing software perfect for beginning movie makers. That's good, but now I don't really want my audio from my video. In fact, I just want this audio file. One way to detach audio from a video containing sound is to right-click on that video and select Detach Audio. At this point, you can highlight this audio file and press Delete. That removes it from the timeline. And of course, this can be done for any other file. If you highlight it and press Delete, it will be gone. Final Cut Pro is an extremely useful video editing software perfect for beginning movie makers. Great, I think that sounds good. But now I have 50 seconds or so of just fluff, of stuff I don't really want to use. This was just me rehearsing. So how do I get rid of this? In order to get rid of this, I want to do some slicing. I want to chop up my video. To do this, I'm going to go up where there's this cursor icon, click it, and I'm going to select the blade. The blade allows me to add slices and chop my videos into two different parts, to the left of where I selected and to the right. From here, I can then click on this video and hit delete. Notice now that this is significantly shorter. So say for example, I want to make it so that right when I start talking is the very beginning of the video. What I can then do is I can select my blade tool. By default, this is bound to B on your keyboard, and add a slice right here. And then I also kind of want to slice right where my audio file is. Now notice it's hard to make an exact cut, so I'm going to toggle snapping again by pressing the N key. And notice that this snaps right to where this cut is. So when I make this cut, they're exactly lined up. So now I'm just gonna select this clip and hit delete. And as you can imagine, all I will do is simply repeat this process to make all the cuts that I want. For example, you'll notice that there's a lot of just silence right here as I'm trying to, mentally prepare and memorize what I'm saying next. Final Cut Pro is a... Oops, that was clearly a mistake. I didn't really want that in my video, obviously. So what I can then do is just select my blade tool again, make some cuts here, make some cuts at the very end of here, and just basically surround this area that I don't want, right? And then select delete. All I did was make 2 cuts, well, I guess 4, but 2 areas of cutting, and then I deleted what I didn't want. So now what I'm left with, beginning movie makers. Final Cut Pro, so I just made my first jump cut. That's pretty cool. So then, as you can imagine, for now, what I want to do is just make a bunch of cuts and line up everything that I want to do. Now, as I'm doing my edits right here, I'm noticing that sometimes I'm making cuts, but I don't really want to make small cuts like this since that's just kind of a pain in the butt. So for example, I'm gonna play this. Movie makers. It's relatively easy to... There's a small little break right here that I don't necessarily like. It's a bit, I don't know, clunky. Now, I don't really want to make a cut right here and then a cut right here and then hit delete. That just takes too much time. So one thing I can then do is shorten the beginning of my clip by hovering over the left side right here where you see this line. Hovering over this and see how my cursor changed to this arrow? Notice how the bracket's pointing to the right. That means I'm selecting this clip. Whereas if I were to move my mouse slightly to the left, the bracket moves to the left, meaning I'm selecting this clip. What I can then do is when my cursor is selected on the right clip that I want, I can left click and drag left or right. This either shortens or prolongs the clip and either brings in whatever was before, brings back what I had, or I can then reduce it like so to kind of shorten the length of this. So that way when I play this now, makers. It's relatively easy to pick compared to makers. It's relatively easy to There's that short jump right there. Okay, I edited the beginning of this video. It's all laid out, it's all ready to go. As you can see, I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different jump cuts, and the jump cuts are just a matter of making cuts wherever I didn't want audio or video, for example. So now I have this all laid out, and honestly, this is the very basics of editing a video. I could export this and it's probably just fine. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make this be a little bit more advanced. One thing I can do is left click on any video and go over here in the top right corner. This shows you the info of this video, all this metadata, and that's fine and all. But for the sake of more so editing, what you can do is click on this right here, this little film icon, and you can change some settings here. From here you can adjust the opacity, so how transparent or solid your clip is. So for example, 100% means it's a solid video, or 0% means you can't see it at all, and anything in between is transparent. You can adjust the position of your clip in pixels, where the X direction of course changes its direction horizontally, positive going right, negative going left, and then the Y going vertically, positive going up, negative going down. You can left click and drag up and down to adjust these values, or you can left click once and then type in any value you want, followed by enter. You also have rotation, where the same system applies. You can left click to type in a number, or left click and drag. The rotation adjusts how it is, of course, rotated, going up to 360. Of course, you can go beyond, but anything beyond that is just the same thing as 0 through 360. That's how rotation works. Another thing you can do is adjust the scaling. This is how big your clip is, your video, where 100% is the default normal value, anything below is smaller, and anything larger is zoomed in. You can adjust the scale all, so it adjusts accordingly, and it maintains the same exact proportions, or you can adjust just the individual scale X and scale Y values. Another thing you can do is adjust the crop, meaning you can cut off certain portions of your video. Cutting off the left side, for example, will make it so that I bring a bar over here and just kind of cut off my video from here. Say, for example, I don't want my TV in this screen. I can adjust this left crop to here, at which point I could probably zoom in and move accordingly so that way the video fits the screen. And then the right, top, and bottom as well. Distortion allows you to move where each of these corners of your videos are. Bottom left adjusts this bottom left corner, and you can move where it is in terms of X and Y coordinates relative to its normal default value. This is good for, say for example, I wanted to take the time to put on a fake thing on this TV, for example. I could add in a new clip and then adjust its distortion as following. In fact, let's explain how to add in multiple video clips. Let's say I had a different video clip. For the sake of this, I'm just gonna use the same clip as before, but pretend this is a different thing. I can click and drag this onto the timeline on top of the video I already made. If I were to hit play, it only shows this video, and that's because this video is overriding this video down here. For now, I'm going to detach this audio because I don't really want the sound at the moment. Also, for the sake of me talking over this tutorial, I'm going to explain that you can deactivate clips by hovering over them and pressing the V key on your keyboard. This activates and deactivates clips. So for example, if I were to deactivate this clip, this is no longer seen. If I were to deactivate both of these clips, that means nothing is playing right now. So I can press V again to reactivate it. Let's go back to distorting. This clip is over top of this previous clip. If I were to adjust this clip's distortion, and maybe things such as like its scale, its position, I could attempt to distort it such that I could override my TV screen, but adjust its distortion such that the bottom left corner is, say, down here, right? Bottom right corner is down here or something. I could adjust it so that the top right, of course, and then the top left could be up here somewhere. So now if I were to hit play, it looks like that's on my TV screen. Of course, I only put about 10 seconds of effort into this, whereas if you were to spend more time into it, you could probably make it look a bit more seamless and a bit more natural. Obviously, I'm going over top of my mic here, and this isn't properly lined up, but it was just demonstrating the purpose of distorting. See how that kind of can be used, makes sense, more or less. That was pretty much just the basics of how you can manipulate a video. Another thing you can do is click on this setting up here to adjust its color. This is called color correction. There's 3 different tabs here that are important, one being color. This can adjust the main color of your video, one being saturation, which affects the saturation, and the other being exposure, of course. Another thing you may want to do is add in transitions into your clips. So say, for example, going from this clip to this clip, I wanted to do a fade or something like that. I can do that by going to this bottom right corner and clicking on this button right here. If you don't see this window, that's probably because none of these are clicked. You can click on them to toggle them on or off. This is your transition window. You can sort through different settings of transitions. For now, I'm just going to go under all, and you can see that there's one called cross dissolve, for example. Pick any transition that you like, left click on it, and drag it in between whatever clips you want to be transitioned between. So for example, these. What this does is this will seamlessly transition from this clip to this clip. Beginning movie makers. It's relatively easy to pick up. You can add transitions to the beginning of clips, not necessarily in between clips. Final Cut Pro is and at the end as well. Let's get into it. Transitions can be deleted just like any other clip. And of course, feel free to look through the different types of transitions to get one that you like. Makers. It's relatively easy to pick up. Also, another thing that you may want to do is add in an effect on your video. This is the tab over next to the transitions, so this one right here. There are 2 different main sections here, one being video and one being audio effects. Video obviously can only be placed on a video clip, and this can affect certain things on your video. Say, for example, a different color, maybe you can distort it, or maybe add some sort of tile pattern or something like that. Say, for example, you can look under these different tabs, and I don't know, I really like this glow effect. Drag it onto here, and you can see it apparently makes everything a bit brighter. What I can then do is, say that's a bit too much for me, is I can left click on the clip that this is on, go under the video editing tab right here, and I can change the amount of the glow. Or if I don't like it at all, I can select it and just delete it. And then the same can be applied for audio as well, audio effects. You can add things here such as an EQ, which changes the different frequency ranges, levels, of course adjusts the volume, things such as reverb. Say, for example, I wanted to add in a voiceover enhancement onto my audio recording. I can drag that onto here and play the result. Final Cut Pro is an extremely useful... You can toggle between on and off by clicking on your clip that is being affected and checking this box. Blue check mark means it's activated, and black means it is deactivated. Final Cut Pro is an extremely useful video editing software, perfect for beginning movie makers. So obviously this particular effect gives a bit of a smoother, jazzy kind of voiceover effect. And I'm going to delete this because I don't necessarily want it at the moment. So you can look through all these effects to kind of add things to your liking, kind of just give your video a little more pizzazz. Other things you can add in are up here on the top left. This leftmost window shows your libraries, so all of your folders, all of your projects. This one shows all of your photos that are on your computer. This is mostly synced up with like iTunes and iPhoto, for example. And over here on the right is where you can add in things such as text and generators, which are sort of funky moving things such as, for example, this glimmer one I like. You can add it in and it's just kind of like a simulated preset. For generators, you can left click and you'll have this typical tab to adjust, you know, your scale and things as normal, but to the left of that is your actual generator settings tab, where each generator has specific settings that you can toggle. So for example, on this particular one, I can adjust the number of particles, I guessed, or how fast they move, their color, how big they are, yada yada yada. Another thing you may want to do is add in text onto your video. You can do that under the titles library, or title browser, I guess, and searching through the different types of text that they have available. Of course, you can search under different tabs, and let's say I really like, I don't know, the plain custom text. You now have the very basics of text added onto your clip. See that? I just dragged it on top of my video clip. I can change the length of this as I would any other video clip. I can also change the size and what have you, as we did before. But then one thing you can do is over here, you can click this, and this changes your actual text. This is where I would type in what I want to say. How to make a video or something. I could just add that in, right? Another thing I can do is change the font style up here to my liking. And you can also change different styles, as we'll see later, and save them as presets. You can change the font size, how it's aligned, and all these other fun things. You can add things such as a 3D effect, what color the text is, if it has an outline, if it glows, if it has a shadow behind it. Another thing you can do is change these parameters over here on this leftmost tab, which basically adjust how the text fades in and how long it stays on for and what have you. Another thing you can do is, of course, on text, you can add in transitions just as you would for any other video clip. Final Cut Pro is an extremely useful, and of course what you can do is delete transitions as before and move this around, maybe add a transition here, just kind of do more editing as we did before. That's just for the sake of this tutorial. I don't think I necessarily want that, but hey, let's say that's pretty much all I wanted to do. That's just the very, very, very basics. That's my good first video. What I can then do is highlight everything I want to do. I can select File, Share, and then I can choose however I want to export my video. For now, I would recommend just doing a master file. All this is saying is I'm exporting this as video file. That's all that simply says. You can do things such as change the name here, add in some tags, that's just metadata. You can also adjust the settings, how you want it to be encoded. Let's say, for example, I want it to have better quality than just being faster. You can change the resolution, and then once you're ready, you can select Next. This is where you can choose where you want to save your file, and then you can select Save. At this point, Final Cut Pro will render your video, as you can see here in this top left, this circle. If you want, you can click this, and this shows what Final Cut Pro is actively doing. Sometimes it'll be doing stuff in the background, such as pre-rendering. Other times when you do this, it'll actively be taking up all of its memory, or well, CPU, to export your video. At this point, you wait for it to reach 100%, and your video is finished. And there you have it. That's pretty much it. That's how to make your first video in Final Cut Pro. That's just the basics, nothing too crazy. However, it does kind of get you off the ground if you've never used the software before. I hope that helped. Also, I'm curious if you have any other suggestions on what tutorials you'd like to see me make. Feel free to put that in the comments as well. I'm always up for video ideas. I want to know what you guys are interested in learning how to make. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope I helped. I'll see you all later.